Okay, so let me describe some of the things that I will refer to in the next video. When I was young, women used to kind of mock me about being attracted to me. They say, oh, and kind of make a fuss about it, going back to grade school and junior high. And women would say things like, no one could ever like you but your mother. In grade school, this one kid said, you'll only get fat black women, and so on. So they were impressing upon me these ideas, and women were mocking me in different sexual manners, with different sexual mannerisms on purpose for the psychological effect, looking back at it, applying deductive reasoning and critical thinking masterfully. And they were basically trying to get me to feel the desire to commit crimes, heinous crimes that have to do with sexual assaults and things of this nature. And, some of them would go further than others, licking their lips, rubbing their legs on mine under the table. And some of these people, they didn't really seem like such bad people, but they were playing their part. And some of them pointed out to me that they're not allowed to talk to me, and they'll get in trouble for talking to me. And so I know without a doubt that this is how it works. When I look back at it, it didn't really stick out that much to me during the time, but when I look back at it and all the future harassment I faced, and after that, and the present harassment, I quickly realized that yes, this is what's going on. And yes, it does go back to the definitions. I mean, to sophisticate means to deprive of genuineness, naturalness, or simplicity, to make worldly wise, to remove the naivety and to make worldly wise, and to make complicated or complex. So it's not just to be complicated or complex or refined scientifically. It's also to deprive of genuineness, naturalness, or simplicity. A lot of people don't understand why these definitions overlap, why there are two definitions for the same word, and what it really means and how it relates to phonetics and to Latin and Greek roots. Okay, Sophia, Sophie. Okay, Sophie is a sovereign of Persia. It's also knowledge, wisdom, and science. So Sophia that they're referring to is knowledge as it pertains to wisdom and science, and not spiritual knowledge. So Dan Brown, in that regard, was right, that it is a battle between the cult centers, trade routes people in the ancient world, in Canaan, in Egypt, in Babylon, in Persia, in Assyria, and so on, who used to leverage their knowledge of science over people who had an innate and natural desire to fall behind religious leaders and perceived prophets, especially martial artists who would become the kings, and they would use their martial arts insight to determine whether or not they should allow a prophet. So one way to look at it is we come from a long line of warriors. Some people, a lot of people do, especially those of us who express these genes more than others. And we're the biggest threat to society because people are naturally inclined to gravitate to us, kind of like the sun. And we're like the center of life, the nucleus, if you will, that gets people to kind of, incidentally, a nucleus is also a central point or group of mass about which gathering or concentration or accretion takes place. It is also the small, brighter, denser portion of a galaxy or the head of a comet, not just a cellular organelle that is essential to cell functions and so on. Okay, so it is like the center, the heart, the core. So again, part 2 is very important. Women used to try to provoke me to be violent and to be a rapist. And if I didn't have this martial arts sophistication with an emphasis on a light tempo, and I wanted to balance myself, I could be knocked off balance and into the dark side easily. But I was focused on this kind of higher form of African spirituality and love that was impressed upon me by my dad and my grandmother and my uncle. He was known for his stubborn integrity, and that was put on the pamphlet of his funeral service, I believe it was. So again, historically going back, people say the Igbos are good people. And this was part of the politics of the time when they were determining whether or not to let Biafrans run Nigeria, which is the state they sought to carve and separate from Nigeria. They said that the Igbos are good people, and they're industrious and ambitious. And of course, the most educated group of people in America is Nigerians as a group. Going back to, the references I got from about the late 90s, which is still significant now, as you can imagine. And if you were an oppressor and you wanted to suppress and prevent integration at the highest levels, or the higher levels, you would want to sabotage the second generation of the most successful types of black people. Okay? And a brain surgeon's son, you know, the son of two doctors, if you're a eugenicist and you're into genetics and things of this nature and how it relates to culture and gene expression, and you worship Galton, who was a statistician who wrote about heredity and the relation between heredity and success, or genes and success, then of course you would put a special emphasis on singling out people like me for smear campaigns and to play them out. To pretend that I'm wrong is disingenuous. To pretend that it is irrelevant that I've been a grand champion for 21 years, okay? And I displayed an uncanny ability to outmaneuver people who were adults when I was, 15, 16 years old when I won this trophy. It's 97. Okay, this is 21 years ago, okay? And I was outmaneuvering adults, okay? And I was pretty much among the most respected martial artists at the studio back then. So to then pretend that, oh, this has no bearing in reality, no basis in reality, as somebody who's a brain surgeon's son who's been a champion for 21 years, who's been doing martial arts for 20 years, it's out of the realm of possibility that he's the top martial artist. And it's out of the realm of possibility that Africans are the first ones to come up with martial arts. They're called Soul Brothers. Shaka Zulu, the Ashanti tribe, and on. The Leopard Society, Beni Hassan, 2800 BC or something. The first example of martial arts in any civilization. But it's out of the realm of possibility that a black person could be the top martial artist, who's a brain surgeon's son, who's 6'4", and who's faster, a striker, and more surgical than anyone out there. To then turn around and say, well, this guy's suffering from delusions of grandeur. You could argue that I'm suffering from delusions of grandeur, saying my dad's a brain surgeon and showing you his certificates. And on top of that, I have a degree in information technology with a concentration in software engineering, which displays the ability to be logical. So when you think about senses, sensibility, wit, and logic, and everything that has to do with different forms of intelligence, okay, I have displayed an uncanny ability to live in reality and to understand things to a much greater and much more sophisticated level than other people, and a much more spiritually intelligent degree than other people have displayed. And so on top of that, you have, what does it mean to be witless? Okay, remember Muhammad Ali, this famous quote, I outwit them and I outhit them. He was also a martial artist. So what it means to be witless is foolish, destitute of wit or understanding, and mentally deranged. So what is the opposite of witless or mentally deranged? It is having the wit to outmaneuver very insightful and focused people with martial arts. This has to do with senses and sensibility and awareness and consciousness. And so what is a mentally ill person? He's in like a stupor as a result of a chemical imbalance, just like a drunk is in a stupor as a result of drinking. For them to then turn to the political opposition, psychiatry, and demand that I take psych meds, and turn to the pharmaceutical sector with all the lawsuits against them, and mental health's long history of persecuting whistleblowers and political dissidents, the political abuse of psychiatry, pages and pages, okay, referring to these abuses. And on top of that, I have hundreds of videos where I'm critical of them, and they're the political opposition. My goodness. Could America be any more witless and mentally deranged? Obviously, I have displayed the highest form of intelligence to be found in this nation. I challenge you to present an argument to the contrary, a logical argument that is not fallacious and full of sophistry and illusion, but actually based on actual fact, and not corrupted science departments who have vested interest with America's propaganda campaign as they present the wisest and the best, quote unquote, to the military and to the intelligence community that recruits right out of these same colleges that have secret societies. What could the secret be? Johann Berzelius, a chemist. Skull and bones, measurements. There's no way around it that I am correct. And it is preposterous, outlandish, silly, and downright displaying the most appalling degree of incompetence for any professional to pretend it is not far more logical to assume that I am correct and precisely correct than it is to assume that I'm mentally ill. Thank you.